Hey guys, so I want to do a quick video here for some of you because a good chunk of the class is going to run into a few problems when you're using the hypershade with RenderMan. Now, I personally don't have this issue, so I can't really recreate the problem. But we've noticed over the last few months, for some reason, a certain percentage of each class, like a few students, are going to run into a problem where the materials might look green in the viewport when you assign something like a flat green color. And then when you open the hypershade, you may notice it immediately crashes. Or when you make a new material and try to see that in the hypershade, it crashes. So these are two different issues. One is more severe than the other, but there is a workaround for both. So I'm going to try to show you and to kind of explain what's going on here, just so you're aware. All right, so the first issue that a couple of people are going to run into, yourself included possibly, is when you assign a material to something. Like let's say for activity 1.1, you want to go in there and assign a material to one of these guys. So what I'm going to do is go to the preset browser. Okay, so here we have all of our RenderMan materials. And we're just going to pick something random. Like we'll put this green metallic on there. So I have it selected, right click, import and assign, and you can see it looks sort of like it's assigned a material. We'll do this again with a different one. So we'll click over here. We'll do maybe, I don't know, this violet rubber, import and assign. Boom, there we go. Now the problem is when you're assigning materials in here to the viewport, when you guys do it, you may notice that your ball or whatever you're assigning the shader to looks like a solid green color. So what is going on here? Well, the good news is the solid green color really isn't breaking anything in the render. So even if it does look green, if you still do a render, you're probably going to notice it's totally fine and it's not ruining the image. It's just really annoying to troubleshoot this in the viewport. So what's kind of happening is basically what you want to kind of think of is your Maya viewport is a Maya specific thing. So this is Maya trying to draw color and very rough sort of lighting and shadows and highlights. This really isn't a RenderMan thing. RenderMan is when you turn this on or if you use the image tool. So it's a plugin for Maya. It's not really part of Maya like the viewport. So this means when you put a RenderMan material on an object like this, Maya's viewport occasionally has an issue where it doesn't know what these RenderMan materials are because, again, it's not really part of Maya. It's a plugin. And so because something breaks on the back end and it can't really figure out what these things are, it unfortunately defaults to green, which means it doesn't know what the shader is. It can't figure out how to draw the color. And I can actually recreate this sort of by deleting the material. So for example, like here's my little green metallic ball. I'm in the hypershade. This is where we're going to talk about a separate issue in a little bit. But I'm going to graph this material out. So right here we have, this is the green material. If I ever want to verify that, if I right click, select objects, you can see it selecting that object. It's just a nice way to see, hey, that's the material assigned to this object. But we're going to click on it, graph out the network. And the material is made up of two things. You have the material itself and this thing called the shading group. So this is what's connecting the material to that object right there. So think of this kind of like a middleman. Now another thing that's happening is if you click on the shading group and look at the properties for it, you should see, actually I'm not seeing it here. Sometimes it's going to put like a Lambert in here. If I click on this, actually not seeing it, which is weird. Okay, this one has it, this Lambert one. So it's going to try to put a Maya material on there. If I were to delete this material completely, like the material and the shading group, see how it turns to like a flat green color? That is Maya telling you there's no shader on it, it can't draw it. So this is what a lot of you are going to see even if you do have a shader on it. So there's something wrong with this shader assignment. Now, there are a couple things you could maybe look into to perhaps fix it. I haven't been able to test it because I can't recreate the problem on my laptop. But if you want to maybe troubleshoot this a little bit on your end, if this happens, what you're going to do is go to the preferences. We're going to come down here to RenderMan, and then you're going to go to the workflow tab. So right here, there's this thing called default Maya surface. Use initial shading group shader. So if I open this up and you come down here a little bit, yours might be set to Lambert if you've never been in here before. What you could try doing is changing it from Lambert to use initial shading group shader and hit save and just see if the next time you assign a material, if it looks correct. You may have to restart Maya and open it back up because sometimes when you change this setting, it doesn't really update until you open the software back up. But this might fix it. You could try none. But if you feel like, regardless of what you do, the initial shading group, the Lambert, you could even try, a blend. There's a surface shader down here somewhere you could use. That's also fine. These are just different materials that Maya uses. But if they're all turning it green, it doesn't seem like it works. It's not a big deal. The backup plan for this whole thing is, even if it's still green, if you look at the top of your viewport, see there's a couple buttons here, wireframe, shaded, there's one called use default material, and then wireframe on shaded. So you've probably seen most of these before. The shaded mode is the one that's kind of having an issue. If you go to the button to the right, use default material, what this does is it forces the viewport to turn every material to the initial gray starting material, which is Maya's default Lambert. Now, when you do this, this isn't really breaking the material, because see how it looks like I've lost the pink color or that metallic green? Even if you have this turned on, if you render it, it's still going to have the correct information. This one doesn't look right because I deleted the shader earlier, but you can still tell that is a pink color. So your fix for the viewport is to just turn on that one button right here. And don't worry about not seeing color in the viewport. Normally when you're working inside of the 3D viewport, you want it to be gray because this is a lot faster. The only time you want to see shaders and color and texture and all that stuff is when you're really doing a render, which is you're going to turn on that button right there. So don't panic. It's really not a big deal. But yeah, that's one of the problems. Now, the other issue, which is more of a severe problem, is a couple of you, when you go into the hypershade, like even in this project, if you open that window right there, if you notice that you immediately get a fatal error and Maya crashes, unfortunately, you have a slight problem with the hypershade. There's a very strange bug going on where the Maya hypershade has an issue drawing these little preview images. This is called a swatch. You can tell it's not very helpful anyway because it's just a little shader ball with a star. It doesn't really show you anything interesting, but this is what's breaking the hypershade. And when it causes the hypershade to crash, all of Maya crashes. So how do we fix it? Well, to fix this, we have to go in here and remove the swatch and tell the swatches not to update. Now the problem is, to do this, you have to go into the hypershade, and it's sort of this catch-22 where you can't even go into the hypershade to do this because, again, as soon as you open it, it crashes. So here's what I'd recommend you do. If you're in a project like this that already has materials in it, like we have for 1.1, don't use this one as the activity to fix the problem because you can't even open the hypershade. You're going to go up to the top, you're going to say New Scene. Don't save, or save it if you're doing something, but go into a new project, and this is where you're going to open the hypershade. So you're going to click, open it up. Now when you do it in a new scene, most likely it's going to open totally fine. Like it's not going to crash, you're going to move the window around. Now as soon as you make a material, like if you make a Pixar surface material, it will probably crash immediately. So this is the problem. It's these RenderMan materials existing in the hypershade with that little preview image right there. Now, because we're in a new scene and we haven't made this yet, we have the opportunity to fix it. So what we're going to do is, first off, in the hypershade on the left side, hit that little button that says on, turn it to off. So this makes sure that those swatches never update, which is honestly a waste of time anyway. It's just extra calculations of it trying to draw these all the time. So who cares? So don't update. And the next thing we want to do is remove the icon completely. So that's right next to it. View as icon, view as list. You're going to do view as list, and you're going to leave it this way. So don't update the swatch, Don't show the swatch, keep it as a list, which is totally fine. Now, the one thing about this is if you're going to use a list, of course, you can't see the material. So anytime you make something, like if you make a RenderMan Pixar surface or whatever, every time you make a material, don't forget to name it. So if I know what this is supposed to be, I can just, you can hold down Control and double click on the material right there. So Control double click will allow you to rename it. And I could say this is supposed to be, I don't know, like a concrete material. So as long as you're naming the nodes properly and naming your materials, this icon thing really doesn't matter anyway. It's completely irrelevant. So we're going to leave it to a list, name everything. I might do this anyway just to be efficient because, again, you don't really need the icons. It's just a waste of resources. So once this is set up and you've done those settings, close out. So this is saved with bias preferences as soon as you do that. So when you go back to any of your projects, like we'll go back to this guy, we're going to open the Hypershade back up, see how it's still set that way. So off, set to list. So again, we just went to the other scene just to turn these off as a fix so it doesn't try to draw anything. And that's going to allow you guys, or at least those of you who are experiencing the issue, to finally go in here and see all the information. So it's a temporary band-aid. If you guys aren't running into this issue, you can completely ignore this video and kind of keep going forward. But there are going to be a good chunk of you that have to deal with this. So it could be something they fix in one of the future updates. I really don't even know why it's happening to some of you, because we're all using the same laptop. We all have like pretty much the same version of Maya, the same version of RenderMan. I believe it has something to do with our graphics card, the driver. So it's possible that if you start going through your updates, one of the Alienware updates, maybe the graphics card driver is out of date. There's something else going on that in the process of updating could just naturally fix this. But for now, at least we know the workaround. So if you guys have any questions about this, just let me know. I'm on Discord quite a bit. Do apologize about this really annoying and inconvenient issue, but at least you can see, hey, once we identify the problem, we can still troubleshoot it and keep on working.